LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 15th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 18 of the weekend's best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational and informative fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows. This week from four of the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, because this week there is no NBC. Meet the Press was preempted by soccer coverage, so remember next time you see Chuck Todd say their slogan, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, remember he's a liar. But that's just, I guess, my joke to start the show. But you can see the three main topics I'm covering listed with details down in the video description. And if you're watching the recorded version of the show, you should see time indexes down there so you can skip between the topics or go back to the beginning of the topic if you find it especially interesting. And at the end, you'll see is my third and final mini topic where Bill Maher and Michael Moore discuss some big comedic news involving atheism. But as usual, I'll start with the two main topics, the Democratic, then the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. None of the three remaining candidates, no Trump, no Hillary, no Bernie, doing interviews this morning. Bernie Sanders was scheduled for ABC's this week, but then for some reason he wasn't on. I don't know what the story behind that is. I couldn't find it out. But instead, I'll have several possible vice presidential candidates, two for Trump and one each for Hillary and Bernie. Plus Reince, Priebus, and Paul Manafort try to explain the way the Republican Party is trying to unify. But first, I want to start with the Democratic side of the race and a political comedy clip from someone you may not have seen for a while, Jon Stewart. And I used some clips from Jon Stewart in this interview he did with David Axelrod earlier this week in my video that's been kind of controversial, Bill Maher versus Jon Stewart, sexist versus non-sexist Donald Trump critique, which follows on my last couple weeks of criticisms of some of the sexist stereotypes Bill Maher used in his shows on HBO the last couple weeks. But I actually wanted to start with a clip of something that Jon Stewart said in his interview about Hillary Clinton that I haven't shown, and then I will discuss that clip after you watch it over here.
Talk show. And I won't say anything.
You had that thought too, huh?
If you ever watch Magic Johnson's talk, Magic Johnson was a charming individual, but he wasn't a talk show host. And when you watched his show, you could almost see Arsenio's advice to him in real time rendering. So he would sit and he would go, my first guest tonight. Oh, Arsenio said enthusiasm is something that Sal is, my first guest tonight is share, everybody. But it never seemed authentic and real to his personality. It seemed like he was wearing an outfit designed by someone else, for someone else, to be someone else. And that is not to say that she is not preferable to Donald Trump, because at this point, I would vote for Mr. T over Donald Trump. But I think she will be in big trouble if she can't find a way, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a real person doesn't exist underneath there. I don't know.
You dabbled on the government side when you were advocating for the Zadroga Act for 9/11 survivors. Did you work with her when she was senator of New York on that?
No.
So you never
I
had
worked
any...
with Kristen Gillibrand.
Mm-hmm. I see. So she was out of the Senate by then.
She's terrific. Kristen Gillibrand is terrific.
So Hillary was out of the Senate by then. You must have had her on your show.
Yes.
And what was that like?
Really cool. It's, look, there are politicians who are either rendering their inauthenticity in real enough time to appear authentic, and then there are politicians who render their inauthenticity through, it's like when your computer, you want to play, if you have a Mac and you want to play a Microsoft game on it,
yes,
and there's that weird lag.
Yes. No, I mean, I think
Hillary
that's a
Clinton.
big problem. There's like a 7-second delay, and all the words come out in a perfectly politically
Right.
calibrated sentence.
Right. Now, what gives me hope in that is that there's a delay, which means she's somehow fighting something. I've seen politicians who don't have that delay and render their inauthenticity in real time, and that's when you go, that's a sociopath.
That's an uplifting message there.
By the way, as far as uplifting messages, I have.
And if you want to see what he's saying about uplifting messages, I put a link down in the video description to the entire hour interview that David Axelrod did with Jon Stewart. Also down in the video description, I forgot to mention, is a link to this clip list of the 18 clips I'm using. It's a little bit shorter than usual, but you can kind of follow along with the notes I use to tell myself what's in the next clip. And if you're looking at those notes, you'll see in the next clip it's Michael Moore and Bill Maher talking about Bernie Sanders, and especially what is, I guess, Bernie Sanders called democratic socialism. They didn't actually use the word democratic socialism, but I thought there were some really interesting discussions between Michael Moore and Bill Maher. I think I have 3 different clips of Michael Moore, or maybe even 4 clips of Michael Moore along the way. Sometimes I disagree with Michael Moore. I even made a video talking about a mistake in his movie Capitalism, a Love Story, about FDR's Economic Bill of Rights. I'll put a link down to that in the video description if you're watching this as a recorded show. But several things that Michael Moore says I do really agree with. And this is about his latest movie, which I haven't seen. Hopefully I'll get to see in the next week or so on DVD. It just came out on DVD, which is why he was on Bill Maher's show and talking about a little bit about democratic socialism in a way I will discuss after you watch that clip here.
We'll hear about all these great benefits that they have in other countries. They think, well, the taxes are higher. But you raise a great point, which is actually our taxes may be lower nominally, but not really, because we have fees on so many things, and licenses,
like tuition,
co-op pays, and
student loans,
right,
the nursing home for your parents. These things are free or nearly free in these other countries. So while they pay a little more in taxes, we don't call them taxes here. But if you add our taxes to the tuition, to daycare fees, nursing home fees, all the co-pays, deductibles, we pay a lot more than the French and the Norwegians and all these countries, and
get less,
get far less.
And this, this is, we're talking in broad parameters, but this is basically what Bernie Sanders is selling. This is really why he has caught on. I keep saying it's a new deal. You pay a little more in taxes, but you get so much more.
And in the end, you are out of pocket less overall for everything, because you don't have $100,000 of student loans to pay off. You don't have to pay for daycare when you have a job. You get, like in Italy, there's 6 to 8 weeks paid vacation that workers get. And these other, I think to be in the European Union, actually, your country has to have 4 weeks paid vacation as the law. And you have to have paid maternity leave, and you can't have a death penalty. If you have any of these things, you can't be in the European Union.
And in Europe, do they poison their citizens with lead? Not that Europe is perfect.
So like I said, some of these political comedy clips aren't really that comedic. It's more policy-oriented, although I guess there was a little joke from Bill Maher at the end, kind of dark humor about Flint, Michigan. But what they're talking about there, even though they didn't say democratic socialism, they're talking about all the things that apparently are in Michael Moore's recent movie, Where to Invade Next, that are these American ideas that have been adopted over in other countries that have made their lives a lot better, and we should consider adopting them ourselves. And they're not just the economic issues that you generally associate with democratic socialism. He also discussed the penal system in Norway. And because I'm really interested in criminal justice, I have these 2 criminal justice books right over here over my left shoulder about how we need to reform the criminal justice system. And so I wanted to play this one clip on that issue from Michael Moore and Bill Maher before I go on to some of the actual news coverage on the Democratic side of the race. But here's Norway's non-recidivist criminal justice system in this clip.
Mentioned Norway and Germany and these other places where they have, Norway has a 20% recidivism rate because they treat inmates as human beings. And their whole goal from day one there, the warden says to them on day one, you're going to be my neighbor someday because we don't have the death penalty and we don't have life imprisonment. So that means you're getting out of here and you could be living on my street. So I am committed to helping you do whatever so that you're going to be fine when you get out of prison. And, and so 80% recidivism rate in this country, 20% in Norway.
So 80% recidivism rate in this country, 20% in Norway is what Michael Moore said there. But the more important point he made, and you can see it made in both of these books, The New Jim Crow from Michelle Alexander and Matt Taibbi's The Divide, one talking about the racism in the criminal justice system, the other one talking about the classism, and both of them talk about the way the criminal justice system has been, the rhetoric, the anti-crime rhetoric dehumanizes people who are in the criminal justice system, as felons, as criminals, as not really deserving of respect and dignity. And everybody makes mistakes. That's in my video that is sort of a mini book review of these two books up here. I have a clip of Michelle Alexander talking about just what Michael Moore was saying there, that our society has to stop marginalizing and dehumanizing people who make mistakes, even violent criminals. That's one of the mistakes that criminal justice reformers sometimes make, is that they say, it's the nonviolent drug war thing that we have to take care of. Well, that's not all the people in the criminal justice system. There are also people in there who make mistakes and never get rehabilitated, and we have to make mistakes in terms of violent crimes, assaults, even murder. That's what they're talking about in Norway. They, even with their violent criminals, 20% recidivist rate. That's an important thing to do. If you have no death penalty, and hopefully even life without parole is a pretty harsh punishment that should be reserved for people who are completely incapable of being rehabilitated. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point based on that very short clip of Michael Moore and Bill Maher talking about Norway's criminal justice system. Now I'm going to move on to some of the actual news clips. And this first clip is one of the, I think one of the people trying out for vice president, although not real. This is the one probably least likely to be trying out for vice president, because Bernie Sanders is least likely to end up being the presidential nominee of the three remaining candidates. And that's actually what starts off this clip. It's from CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper is talking to Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon, the first U.S. senator to endorse Bernie Sanders, and asking him about the math. That he shows both the pledged delegates and the unpledged delegates. And I remember last week, Bernie Sanders was 296 pledged delegates behind Hillary Clinton. This week, by winning West Virginia, apparently he's gained 2 delegates. Now he's 294 behind. And that's why it's such an impossible task with all the states having proportional outcomes where, it's not winner take all. And he has to win like 2/3 of the remaining pledged delegates to have the most pledged delegates. And that's something Jeff Merkley talks about in response to Jake Tapper's question this morning on CNN State of the Union over
about how to bring. I would say they vote Tuesday, but they've probably been voting for the last 3 months. But the final result comes in on Tuesday. Bernie Sanders is expected to do quite well there, but the delegate math is almost insurmountable. Take a look. You have Clinton with 1,720 pledged delegates, plus 521 superdelegates, 2,241. Bernie Sanders, 1,426 pledged delegates, 41 superdelegates, 1,467. Even if you take out the superdelegates, she still has this 300 delegate lead, which is much wider than the lead Obama had over Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely. It's an uphill climb. He'd need to win about 2/3 of the remaining regular delegates. If he was to win the regular delegates, then it'd be a conversation. Superdelegates don't really belong in the Democratic Party. But it's an uphill climb, but it's such an important conversation for New Jersey to have this conversation. Kentucky, Oregon, California, the Dakotas, for every voter in the Democratic Party in America to be able to weigh in about these big issues facing. We were talking about all these scandals. But there's these big issues. In fact, the middle class is getting squeezed. The middle class is being left out in the cold. And Bernie's creating a clear message. It's resonating with Americans about the fact that we don't just need small changes, we need big changes. We need to put this nation back on track. And that's why it's important to carry this conversation through all of the primaries.
Let's talk about this, the question.
So that's Jeff Merkley of Oregon. an early supporter of Bernie Sanders, in the U.S. Senate at least, making the case for why Bernie should keep on fighting and should try to continue the conversation all the way to the convention, and hope for the very small chance that he might end up with the most pledged delegates. And if he were to end up with the most pledged delegates, I think it would be unprecedented for the superdelegates to change the outcome. But as Jake Tapper said, Hillary Clinton is farther ahead in the pledged delegates than Obama was at this point in 2008, and it's just very unlikely Bernie Sanders could win the nomination, but it's not impossible, and I still plan to vote for him in the California primary on June 7th. But having shown a senator who I suppose could be considered a vice presidential candidate for Bernie Sanders, I'm going to show now another senator, also on CNN State of the Union. This is someone who is on the list of candidates that Hillary Clinton is supposedly considering. He's the Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, and he was asked at the end of the interview about being vice president. He said he wasn't interested. I didn't take that clip, but I took this clip where I think he is giving his best audition to be vice president or the vice presidential candidate, especially in terms of how he's going to help Hillary Clinton win Ohio. He's got that down pretty clearly, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Plan about how to bring manufacturing to this country. Trump has words, but there's not really any depth there, and that's why I trust Hillary to do this right.
Well, Senator, in-depth plans are all fine and good, but as I don't need to tell you, when you go out there and talk to working class men and women in Ohio, people who think that the deck has been stacked against them by the Washington elite, Democrats or Republicans, selling their jobs down the river, whether they're going to Mexico or China, a lot of them seem to be very skeptical of Hillary Clinton and willing to listen to Donald Trump. Are you not concerned about that?
Oh, of course, I'm always concerned in an election. I mean, I'm greatly concerned that Donald Trump will be the nominee of a major political party in this country, and anything can happen in an election. But I also know that Secretary Clinton will work on these trade enforcement issues in a way that and will oppose these trade agreements in understanding how to do that, which Donald Trump has never really offered. I also know that when you talk to working class audiences in Ohio, when they start thinking about this in the next 4 months, Donald Trump has been against the minimum wage. Now he's kind of all over the place, but he's fundamentally against. He said wages are too high, so he clearly has been against the minimum wage. He might act like he changed his position. He's up against prevailing wage, which will be an attack right at the heart of the building trades, the people that build our roads and construct our buildings. He's for right to work, which is a dagger in the heart of working class Ohioans. So I think when they see the big picture on jobs and the big picture on manufacturing and the big picture on trade, they're going to see a few sort of shallow words from Trump, but they're going to see a lifelong commitment to workers from Hillary Clinton. And that's why I trust her to do this right. That's why I endorsed her early. That's why I campaigned hard with her, particularly in the industrial manufacturing unionized parts of Ohio in the Northeast. And that's where she's going to run her margins up and win this state.
The Wall Street Journal report.
So I thought that was a good argument from Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, and I think it's actually unlikely he'll be chosen as the vice presidential candidate, even though he'd be a really good one, just because, especially with Donald Trump being the Republican nominee, there's a significant chance the Democrats could win back the Senate, and if they want to win back the Senate, then they need to keep that seat that Sherrod Brown has in Ohio, especially because there's a Republican governor in Ohio, John Kasich, who would appoint the successor. So that would be losing a seat in the Senate. That doesn't completely rule him out. If Hillary Clinton thinks that it's the difference between winning and losing, and she asks him, he'll probably do it. But and that's something Jake Tapper brought up in the question I didn't show. Anyway, that's the last of the clips completely on the Democratic side, with the two surrogates for the two candidates, Sherrod Brown, basically the Hillary Clinton surrogate, and Jeff Merkley, the Bernie Sanders surrogate. So the next clip, it's mostly on the Republican side, but there are actually references to both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, criticisms from Jeremy Scahill in this next clip. And so I made it sort of a transitional clip, even though it's really on the Republican side. Jeremy Scahill is a journalist who I respect. He works with Glenn Greenwald. They started The Intercept together, and I've been a fan of his for quite a long time. And so I wanted to show this criticism he makes both of Donald Trump on one side for basically being evidence that America has a strain of fascism, which is something I agree with. And then he talks a little bit about problems with Hillary Clinton and even Bernie Sanders on some of these issues. And I'll discuss all of that after you watch that clip over here.
Can I be a wet blanket for a second?
Oh, please do.
You know, I mean, I'm with everyone that I think Donald Trump is a reprehensible individual, and I certainly don't want him to be president of the United States. But I think that just focusing on Trump and what he says misses a deeper, more disturbing reality, and that is that Trump has brought to the public the fact that we have a real strain of fascism in this country. And I think that, you know, to me...
Yeah, led by him. What are you talking about?
No, not led by him. I think that what Trump has done is to give public voice to a sentiment that is held by a significant minority of the population, where now someone is saying the things that they felt they couldn't say in public. So now they can openly be bigots, racists, and they have their candidate. Now, the other thing is,
okay, well,
but I know you and I are both, I think we share the same viewpoint of many of Hillary Clinton's policies. She is the candidate of empire. She is the candidate also of regime change, of humanitarian cruise missiles. I mean, she is hardly the dovish opponent or sort of alternative choice to Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders supports the kill list. So we have three candidates, all of whom have very serious issues that should be investigated and they should be held accountable for in front of the American public. Partisanship doesn't allow that, though.
But, you know, it's funny you say that, because this is what I heard from Republicans this week when they were asked about Donald...
Thanks, Bill.
No, really. When they were asked about Donald Trump, and the reporters kept saying, well, do you agree with Donald Trump on Muslim... No, I don't. Do you agree with Donald Trump on deporting immigrants? No, of course I don't. And then they would say, yes, but he raises an important issue. Like, that's something? I don't agree with Herr Hitler on the Jewish question, but he raises an important issue.
No, well...
Raising an issue is not the same thing as being right on the issue, is it?
Let me just be clear here. I believe that what we're seeing with Trump has whiffs of how Hitler rose to power because of the popularizing of all of these things. But
and the neo-Nazis are strongly behind him.
Well, yeah, I mean, he has an offer from both David Duke and Louis Farrakhan to be his running mate.
David Duke, who? I never heard of the man. David Duke. I don't remember. The name does not ring a bell. I don't know anything about him.
Bed sheets? Oh yeah, I have some of those. Marla Maples was in them. It's like, no, but it is the reality that we are seeing the real risk that an overt fascist is going to come to power. So I totally am on board with we don't want that guy to be president. But as a journalist, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I believe in holding all of these people accountable, including Bernie Sanders, who actually supported regime change in Iraq as much as he wants to attack Hillary.
So that's not something you normally hear in the mainstream media, and Bill Maher and Jeremy Scahill had a longer talk about the mainstream media and whether HBO counts as the mainstream media or not. I put a link down in the video description to as much of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher as you can find online. I can't remember if that part is online or not, but I thought that was interesting, especially the part about Donald Trump representing a strain of fascism. I guess from one point of view, they both violated Godwin's law there. First Jeremy Scahill, and then with the fascism thing, and then Bill Maher saying that I don't agree with Herr Hitler on the Jewish question, but he raises an important issue. That was Bill Maher. So they both violated Godwin's law in comparing Donald Trump to Hitler. But I actually violated that law myself in a video I made for New Year's called "The Scariest Clip of 2015," talking about how I think a lot of the people who support Donald Trump represent what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. And I don't know, I haven't put a link to that video down in the video description, but just look for Scariest Clip of 2016 and it will show up if you really want to see that. And now I actually want to move on to the one quick clip I took of Saturday Night Live. I didn't think their show was that funny last night. Drake was both the guest host and the musical host, and they made a lot of Drake jokes. I'm not a big Drake fan, so maybe it's just me and I'm too out of it to find all that funny, but I didn't take a clip from the cold open, which was kind of funny, where Daryl Hammond was Donald Trump again, and they made fun of these tapes from the 1990s where supposedly he pretended to be his own publicist, which I think is kind of a stupid issue, though I'll cover it slightly when I get to some of the actual news clips. But I did want to show a couple jokes that they made on Weekend Update, both about Republicans and about Donald Trump. First Michael Che and then Colin Jost making these two quick, like 20 seconds worth of jokes from Weekend Update. And this week, by the way, you can see the entire Weekend Update in 2 parts on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel. So that's something to go look for if you like Weekend Update jokes. And I will discuss these 2 Weekend Update jokes after you watch them here.
54% of Americans prefer lice to Donald Trump. Which is weird because lice already dropped out.
But this week, Donald Trump was officially endorsed by Newt Gingrich and Dan Quayle. You know, the best guys and the smartest guys.
I wanted to show those 2 jokes, both because I thought that statistic was kind of funny, that I had seen that before, that 54% of Americans prefer lice to Donald Trump. But I don't know, these poll numbers can change. It's early. It's only May. Maybe lice will win out over Donald Trump by November. You never know. But that second clip also with the Newt Gingrich and Dan Quayle part. Dan Quayle used to be vice president, and Newt Gingrich is one of the possible Donald Trump vice presidents I'm going to show in a minute. Along with Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama. I think he's senator from Alabama. But before I get to any of the news clips, I want to show one more political comedy clip. This is from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. It's Michael Moore and Bill Maher discussing an issue that Bill Maher says he wants to bring up every week with his guests. How do we stop Donald Trump? And I think Michael Moore has an interesting story to tell and kind of an interesting take on the issue over here.
From now until the election, I'm just going to ask everybody on this show, I don't care if it gets boring, how do we stop Donald Trump?
Okay.
Because nobody seems to have a strategy. I know you met him recently, you run a show with him. Everybody says the same thing. He's nice in person, but we don't have to worry about the guy in person. We have to worry about the guy who might be president.
First of all, I was on a show with him 15 years ago on a talk show, and the producer came over to me and said, Mr. Trump's afraid to go on the show with you, that you're going to, do something or say something. And I'm like, what's he worried about me? And I went over and I shook his hand. It was all wet and all,
And tiny.
And
tiny. Yes,
I didn't notice the size at the time. But what I noticed was what you said last week. He was a scared, whiny
little bitch.
He was just like, he goes, so he says to me.
Whiny little bitch.
That's right. Give it up for what you said last week. And so he goes to me, oh, you're not going to say anything out there, are you, about me? Or and I said, I'm from Michigan, man. I hardly know who you are. It's like, well, okay. And I'm like, and that image of him still sticks with me about, it's like why people have been afraid to really take him down. Bill, the question you asked, what are we going to do between now and November? You and I are going to take him down. Yeah. You and I.
I'm down, brother.
No, seriously. This is the end of Donald Trump. He is not going to the White House. That is not happening. Hillary can, if she ends up being the candidate, she can talk policy and all that. You and I will do the things that.
You tell me where to show up.
I will tell you,
okay.
and I promise you that we'll do something that will hope for a good prosecutor.
I'm there, long-haired hippie. See you after the show.
All right, brother. Thank you very much.
Michael Moore, everybody.
So, like I said, I really enjoyed the Michael Moore appearance on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and I would like to see Michael Moore and Bill Maher work together to ridicule Donald Trump, because ridicule is a powerful weapon. Although, actually, if you watch that Jon Stewart interview with David Axelrod, which I have the whole interview linked down in the video description, he talks about how he thinks that satire can, be like the last gust of wind that pushes something over that's been organized by grassroots activists for many, many years. He's talking about the Zadroga Act and, how he did very little at the end to give like an extra little push to something people had worked on for years and years. And I think that may apply also to what Michael Moore was saying there, that, comedians can have a small impact on something like the Donald Trump phenomenon. But it's not going to be comedians alone who stop Donald Trump. And, oh, by the way, while I was watching that clip, I also was looking at the live comments. There's someone who posted a comment. I don't even know what it's about, but I like to at least refer to one comment in every broadcast, because the people who post comments during the live broadcast, those comments are actually part of the fair use analysis of this video, especially if I discuss them. You know, they're scrolling along next to the video while you're watching it, and I discuss the comments along the way, and sometimes I even show them. This is from someone I haven't seen before, making a claim that I cannot verify, but I'm going to show it. That was Lemingkinney saying that Clinton and Trump have the same address in Delaware, and he's not going to thumb up the video till I mention it because it's key information. I have no idea whether that's true or not, but it does give me an opportunity to ask all of you to give this video a thumbs up and share it. And also, you can support my videos on Patreon by becoming one of my monthly patrons. I'm hoping to add on some more $5 a month patrons, and I'm going to have a new reward for the $5 a month patrons, some stickers that I'm making up that I'll be sending out that aren't quite as heavy as the candles, and so they're easier to send out. So down in the video description, you can become one of my patrons. You can thumb up the video. You can post a comment that also helps support the videos, or there's a little eye in the corner here where you can click on that and fund my videos just directly with a one-time contribution through YouTube fan funding. But having shown all those political comedy clips in a row now, I want to get to some actual news clips. I'm going to show a news report from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which was co-hosted by Martha Raddatz and Jonathan Karl. George Stephanopoulos wasn't there this week, and they did a report on Donald Trump's good week and bad week, and gave a lot of the details that are going to come up in some of the other clips, including on the tapes and his meeting with Paul Ryan. And one of the reasons I want to show this clip is because you have Reince Priebus as the next guest on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos appearing live, and he actually watches this news story, and then Jonathan Karl refers to it. So I need to show the news story in order to comment on the interview with the chairman of the Republican Party, Reince Priebus. But first, here's a news story for what's been going on with Donald Trump this week and how he's unifying the party but having some negative headlines, as I will discuss after you watch that here.
The news over the last few days, you might think the tide had finally turned against Donald Trump.
Tale of the tapes. Donald Trump denying he posed as his own publicist in a telephone interview.
Stop asking about Donald Trump's taxes, will you? That's the message from the likely GOP nominee.
A new scathing article in the New York Times about his past with women.
From those questions about his tax returns.
Yes or no, do you believe voters have a right to see your tax returns before they make a final decision?
I don't think they do.
What is your tax rate?
It's none of your business.
To growing confusion over what Trump actually stands for.
Look, anything I say right now, I'm not the president. Everything's a suggestion. No matter what you say, it's a suggestion.
Then there's that recording unearthed by the Washington Post from the early 1990s.
Trump became poor until he got his divorce.
With a Trump spokesman who sounds a heck of a lot like Donald Trump.
He's somebody that has a lot of options, and frankly, he gets called by everybody in terms of women.
Trump flatly denied it.
It doesn't sound like my voice at all.
Raising questions once again about his credibility.
You think about
With female voters already turned off by Trump, the New York Times unloaded a front-page expose on his treatment of women. But despite the onslaught, the reality is, after those meetings on Capitol Hill, Trump is finally starting to unify the Republican Party.
It was very good. It's very productive.
And I can say it was a great first meeting to start that process.
And like the stepdad you didn't like when mom started dating him,
Oh, Dad.
it's sinking in for many of his Republican critics. He's here to stay. Even Senator Lindsey Graham, who said this in December.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
And after a phone call with Trump this week, he's now saying the campaign is over, he won. The insults will stop with me. But House Speaker Paul Ryan still isn't quite sold.
Are you endorsing Donald Trump? If you're not, what is holding you back? And do you really have a choice?
And it's very important that we don't fake unifying. I don't want us to have a fake unification process here.
Republicans like Ryan are concerned about the damage Trump could do to their party. But no one really doubts Ryan will eventually endorse Trump.
Joining us now to discuss.
And like I said, you can see right there that Jonathan Karl is pivoting to his interview with Reince Priebus, who just sat and watched that news story, and he even asks about the end of that news story regarding the meeting with Paul Ryan. I'm going to show that in a minute, although there are a couple other things I thought were kind of strange about that little news story from Jonathan Karl. First, I think that's going to be, hopefully, that's going to be the only comparison you see between Donald Trump and Mike Brady, or maybe it's just Mike Brady is the archetypal stepfather. I don't think so, but that was kind of weird that they threw that little Mike Brady and Marsha Brady in. I don't know. Is that something that CNN's parent company owns? Maybe that's why they threw it in. And then there was a little bit of weird bias in there. I mean, from what I've heard, the Washington Post story seems pretty clear that these tapes from the 1990s are showing that Donald Trump posed as his own publicist, that really is Donald Trump. So I guess it's not that biased to show Donald Trump as the one making those comments. But if you go back and you watch that little news story from Jonathan Karl, when they showed when they played the tapes from the 90s of Jeff Miller, the person, is that the person's name? I can't even remember anymore. I think it was Jeff Miller, or was it John Miller? But when they played the tape, they showed a picture of Donald Trump next to the text of what the person was saying, and then they showed that same picture of Donald Trump when they showed text of what Donald Trump actually said about it this week. So that's kind of a little connection they made in the viewers' minds that might not have been warranted, although the evidence does kind of point towards Donald Trump having pretended to be his own publicist back in the 1990s. Although, like I said earlier, I don't think that's really a big issue. It's pretty much a non-issue given all the other things Donald Trump has done. Unifying the Republican Party, that's more important. And so I want to show the question that Jonathan Karl asked Reince Priebus, the head of the Republican Party, about the meeting that Paul Ryan and Donald Trump had. Reince Priebus was there in this leadership meeting, and I will discuss that after you watch that clip. Let me make sure I have the right one. Yeah, clip number 10 over here.
Republican Party Chairman Reince Priebus. Chairman Priebus, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, John.
So let me ask you, do you agree with that? Basically, everybody I spoke to up on Capitol Hill this week says they fully expect that Ryan will come on board and endorse Trump at some point. Do you agree he's going to do that?
I get the sense that it was a great meeting, and I get the sense that it was everything both parties wanted it to be. I don't speak for Paul Ryan, but
what do you expect?
I got the sense that things are moving in the right directions.
Yeah, are you going to be shocked?
Let me put it this way: I would be surprised if he doesn't get there, because he wants to get there, and the things that had taken place on Friday seem to move the ball a long distance down the field. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't.
So was it right of Ryan to go to that meeting, come out of that meeting, and still refuse to endorse Trump?
No, because I think most people involved, would agree that, in a 45-minute meeting, to just suddenly have reservations and then come out after 45 minutes and say, okay, here's a big bear hug, let's move on. I think everyone gets that the process is better in going through the real details of what everyone brings to the table. What does Donald Trump believe? What does Paul believe? And then only after that process, even if it's a short process, then I think closure is most appropriate then. Let me just say this, John. Both parties left, I think, very pleased with how it ended. So I don't think anyone left surprised or chapped. I think it ended in the right way for everybody involved.
Okay, but let me ask you the big question.
Well, I'm glad nobody left chapped. That would be a very odd outcome to the meeting. And that's Reince Priebus answering the question about why Paul Ryan hasn't decided to endorse Donald Trump yet, even though they've had this meeting. I'm going to show several more, well, was it two or three more Reince Priebus clips, because he did, I guess it would be the full Ginsburg if there were 5 shows, but Meet the Press wasn't on this morning, so Reince Priebus only went on 4 shows. And I think I have one clip from each show, I'm pretty sure. But one person who only went on 1 show, who was also kind of a surrogate for Donald Trump is, and Reince Priebus isn't quite a surrogate for Donald Trump, but Paul Manafort is a surrogate for Donald Trump. He's a senior campaign advisor. In some ways, he's taken over as campaign manager over Corey Lewandowski, according to some people. And here he is answering a question also about the Donald Trump meeting with Paul Ryan. Not only did Paul Ryan not endorse Donald Trump, but their characterization of what happened during the meeting, Donald Trump's characterization versus Paul Ryan or the establishment Republican characterization was different, which you'll see Paul Manafort try to paper over those differences, talking to Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union this morning over here.
That Donald Trump had with House Speaker Paul Ryan on Thursday. People in the Ryan world describe it as a meeting where Donald Trump said what they wanted to hear, what Speaker Ryan wanted to hear about how he would comport himself going forward, and Ryan's concerns about things that Trump has said that potentially alienated women, Latinos, etc. But in the New York Times this morning, Mr. Trump told Maureen Dowd, quote, "We talked about the success I've had," Trump replied. So Ryan didn't ask Trump to stop making remarks that alienate women? No, Trump said. He wants me to be me. So much, Maureen Dowd writes, for the showdown. So which is it? Did he affirm to Paul Ryan, Speaker Ryan, that he was going to behave in a quote-unquote more presidential manner? Or was the conclusion he's got to be him?
Look, both statements have elements of, or both true, actually. I mean, Donald Trump was not asked by the leadership to change, and there's no reason for him to change. He's just won the primary process with a record number of votes, beating a field of 16 qualified candidates. So there's no reason for Donald Trump to change.
Well, that's not necessarily true, though. I mean, appealing to one party's electorate, whether it's Democrat or Republican, is not appealing to a general election electorate.
That's correct, but Trump in the primaries was appealing to the broader electorate, which is why you had crossover Democrats, independents participating in the Republican primaries where they could, even though there were spirited contests going on in the Democratic side. Now, that's not to say that Paul Ryan didn't talk about policy. They actually got along very well. The conversations that they had focused on the Trump agenda, for America, to make America great again, and Paul Ryan's agenda to return prosperity. There were a lot of overlap on the objectives of both of those programs.
But surely you look at the negative ratings that Mr. Trump has with women at large in the general electorate and Latinos, and you think, going forward, it's going to be tough to win the White House if those negatives stay where they are.
Well, you know, this is one of these conventional wisdom facts that are not correct. Yes, there's some high negatives on the part of Trump right now, who's just come out of a very spirited contest. Hillary Clinton's got high negatives too. And when you look at the recent Quinnipiac polls that came out last week, which show Trump winning in Florida and yes, even or slightly ahead in Ohio and Pennsylvania, you look at the gender gaps, and the real gender gap is a male gender gap on the part of Clinton, where she's got a bigger disparity between her support with men than Trump has with women. So it's an issue. It'll be dealt with. We're coming through a healing process. This is when we're unifying our party. The national polls have all shown closure, where Trump now is either 1 or 2 points behind or 1 or 2 points ahead. Mm-hmm. So this is way early, and still already we're seeing convergence on the part of the electorate with Donald Trump. And the meetings with the Hill, with the leadership, were very positive.
Let's talk about
so Paul Manafort is really good at spin there. I don't know if I'm persuaded on the Republican side, the Republican unification side, and the different spin doesn't show an actual split, that they're both truthful statements about the same thing. I don't know about that, but what he said about the polls coming together, that actually is true. There's at least one poll that shows that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, if that's going to be the matchup in November, that they're within a couple points of each other, which that's a kind of a disturbing poll for those people who would prefer that Donald Trump not be the next president of the United States. But like I said before, I do have 2 more clips of Reince Priebus. And the first one is Reince Priebus answering a question over on CBS's Face the Nation about the possibility of a third party, a conservative third party, having a candidate for Republicans who can't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump but don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. And that would be really great, because it would basically guarantee that Donald Trump wouldn't win, because it would siphon off a bunch of his base and elect Hillary Clinton. I mean, unless this third party person, and anyway, you'll see it's like Mitt Romney and Bill Kristol are supposedly talking about this, and Reince Priebus uses some fairly colorful language to describe what kind of mission he thinks this third-party candidacy would be over in, let me make sure I have the right one, yeah, over in this clip.
Bill Kristol and Mitt Romney are trying to put one together. Should they stop that?
Well, I've heard that Mitt actually isn't looking at that. I'm not sure about Bill Kristol, but it's a suicide mission, because you're not only changing and throwing out 8 years of the White House, but you're also throwing out potentially generations on the Supreme Court. Look, we could have up to 3 justices change over in the next 8 years, and this is a suicide mission. It is not right. And I think what people should do is take the Paul Ryan approach, which is to work with Donald Trump and find out whether or not there's common ground and whether there can be assurances on the Supreme Court and those sorts of things to make sure that our future is secure down the line, as opposed to blowing everything up.
Let me ask you about Paul Ryan. He differed.
Suicide mission. I don't know. That seems pretty strong language for a third-party candidacy, but I think what he's trying to say is what I said before the clip, that it basically would guarantee Hillary Clinton's going to win the election. But I don't know. I think the Donald Trump presidency is more of a suicide mission than having a third party guarantee that there won't be such a Donald Trump presidency. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And then I want to show this one final clip of Reince Priebus from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace asked him a fairly confrontational question about this story in the New York Times this morning. You'll see that they actually show a screen capture of the front page of the New York Times about Donald Trump's long-term problems with women, and Reince Priebus does his best to try to answer this question, but he says he's not the person to ask. I think he means Donald Trump is the person to ask, but he also says that, because Chris Wallace asks him if he's bothered by these stories, he says, well, he's bothered by a lot of things, but I think he is bothered by this, because you'll see by the end of his answer, he does actually say he's bothered by everything. Everything bothers Reince Priebus, apparently, as you will see somewhere along the way in this 3-minute, 20-second clip from Fox News Sunday this morning here.
Trump was busy putting out fires this week, trying to get House Speaker Paul Ryan on board his campaign. But this weekend, Trump faces new problems. A newspaper investigation into his treatment of women over the years, and a strange story that he often posed as a publicist to brag about himself. Joining me now, Republican National Committee Chair Reince Priebus, live from RNC headquarters. Chairman, I want to start with that article in the New York Times today. It's called Crossing the Line, Trump's Private Conduct with Women. They did more than 50 interviews over 6 weeks, and they say they found repeated instances of Trump insulting women and making unwanted advances, even in the workplace. Chairman Priebus, does that bother you?
Well, a lot of things bother me, Chris, and obviously I'm the wrong person to be asking that particular question, but look, we've been
wait a minute. Why are you the wrong person? I mean, you're the chairman of the party. This is your nominee, and they're saying that he has mistreated women over the years.
What I would say is, we've been working on this primary for over a year, Chris, and I've got to tell you, I think that all these stories that come out, and they come out every couple weeks, people just don't care. I think people look at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and say, who's going to bring an earthquake to Washington, D.C.? I think the bigger issue when we make these judgments about people are, whether or not individuals are throwing stones in glass houses. And when people are hypocrites, obviously that's when these stories have an impact. But I don't think Donald Trump and his personal life is something that people are looking at and saying, well, I'm surprised that he's had girlfriends in the past. That's not what people look at Donald Trump for. And so I think the traditional playbook and analysis really don't apply.
But forgive me, it's not whether or not he had girlfriends. The question is whether or not he mistreated women, whether he made unwanted advances, whether he humiliated women in the workplace. I don't understand why you say that people don't care about that, and are you going to look into the allegations?
Well, look, I'm not saying people don't care about it. I'm just saying I think the reason he's where he's at is that he represents something much different than the traditional analysis of individual candidates. And yes, everything bothers me, Chris, but I don't know the truth of these things. I don't know, other than reading an article, whether or not these things are true. I think it's something that Donald Trump is going to have to answer questions in regard to. All I'm saying, though, is that after a year of different stories, nothing applies. And so that's all I'm saying. And that I think the bigger question is, between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, who represents somebody that's going to bring a more efficient, accountable, effective government here in Washington? A career politician or a total outsider with potentially some flaws, and a businessman that can get something done? That's what this is about. Now, whether it's going to be a race to the bottom or not, I'm not sure.
I do want to ask you, though, because the...
So that answer from Reince Priebus, which I saw him give on several different shows, is, I think, what you're going to hear from establishment Republicans who are going to end up holding their nose and endorsing Donald Trump or supporting Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. That, especially that word you heard partway through that I didn't mention before the clip. He said Donald Trump is an earthquake, and that they're going to try to latch on to his anti-establishment outsider status and how it's important to shake up Washington, and so they use the word earthquake. But I don't know. That's not an entirely positive metaphor. Earthquakes actually do a lot of damage, and they're not really good things, are they? I think that's kind of a strange metaphor to use for your candidate. It just shows how people really want to shake things up and don't care about the consequences, I guess. But I want to move on to the last 4 clips on the Republican side. They're 2 pairs of clips of potential Donald Trump vice presidential nominees. The first one, not very likely, is Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama. I'm pretty sure it's from Alabama, who was the first senator to endorse Donald Trump. And then there are a couple clips of Newt Gingrich. They're first both talking about policy, and then both actually talking specifically about the vice presidential issue. In this first clip, it's one of the most important issues that was covered on the Sunday news programs this morning, which were kind of superficial, was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz actually reported from Iraq and was talking to U.S. forces there. And I've talked a lot of times about how there's sort of this double-edged sword, that she is embedded with the military and has all these really good contacts in the military. So a lot of times she kind of carries their message and is a messenger for the Pentagon. But also because she has all these inside contacts, she really gets facts other people don't. And she does ask, important journalistic questions. So you have to ask yourself, is that someone we want to have as a journalist? I think overall she does a really good job. And because I gave you that introduction because she asks Senator Jeff Sessions about Donald Trump's anti-Islam comments about banning Muslims and how it actually hurts our foreign policy and our military mission in Iraq and Syria. And she uses actual military people. An editorial David Petraeus wrote about it, and then the general who she's been talking to in Iraq to make that point. And you'll see the response from Senator Jeff Sessions, who's been on the Armed Services Committee in the Senate for a long time, as kind of a surrogate for Donald Trump, I will discuss that after you watch that clip over here.
Former CIA Director David Petraeus, who commanded coalition forces here in Iraq and Afghanistan, wrote an op-ed piece this week saying that the kind of anti-Muslim rhetoric we're seeing back home is very harmful to U.S. national security, writing, demonizing a religious faith and its adherents not only runs contrary to our most cherished and fundamental values as a country, it is also corrosive to our vital national security interests and ultimately to the United States' success in this war. I was out yesterday with the ground commander here, Major General Gary Volesky. He will not talk about politics or the election, but I did ask him his reaction to the Petraeus op-ed.
People forget I have Muslims in my formation that wear my uniform. Your religious background, your beliefs, your ethnicity, we're soldiers here, and we're all defending the Constitution of the United States. That's why we're able to go and operate anywhere in the world, is because we stand for our values, and that builds trust, and people understand we take the moral high ground in this.
Well,
your reaction to that, Senator?
We need to respect people's faith. We need to, when we're working in the Middle East, we need to be very respectful of how these good people conduct their lives and the faith that they have. It means tremendously important to them. But I got to tell you, we do have problems with violent extremism. We need to talk about that. We need to admit it. We need to know the nature of the threat that the United States faces. So I don't think Trump has gone too far. He said we should have a temporary ban on entry of people into the country from the Muslim world, but that's because we have an ineffective screening process that the Defense Department and security forces tell us we don't have the needs we have. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. It's an important issue. I believe Donald Trump is speaking openly about it, but he has also made clear that he hopes to see that end and end soon. Any temporary ban would be, in fact, temporary.
So you see there that Jeff Sessions kind of spun it a little bit, saying that Donald Trump called for a ban on immigration from the Muslim world. He actually said on all Muslims coming into the United States, which isn't quite from the Muslim world. And I don't know, did he sound like he was auditioning for vice president? You'll see him even more explicitly audition to be vice president in this next clip from the same interview. This is, I think, from the very end of the interview. Also talking to Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week. This isn't to Martha Raddatz, it's to Jonathan Karl talking about the actual possibility of being Donald Trump's vice president over here.
Texas speaking on behalf of Trump at their party convention down there. I know you don't expect to be asked, and I know you're not looking for it, but if he asked you to be his running mate, would you accept?
Well, I don't expect to be asked. Yeah. He needs to get the best person who can lead this country. But you saying, would I be ashamed or unwilling to serve this man? No, it would be a great honor to be to assist him in any way possible. We've got to change America. Donald Trump will result in the elimination of Obamacare. Donald Trump will appoint the Supreme Court justice to replace Scalia. That will keep the court from flipping. That will, on the gun rights, he will reduce taxes and create growth and stand up to our trading partners and make sure they comply with our trading agreements.
All right, well, if you get the call, you'll give us a call.
So, yeah, that was pretty much an explicit vice presidential audition there, and I'm going to show two more quick clips on the Republican side of another person who has actually been mentioned much more likely to be Donald Trump's vice president, along with Chris Christie from New Jersey, I guess. Donald Trump has said he wants someone experienced in politics and, an insider, so I guess Jeff Sessions would qualify, but Newt Gingrich, of course, would also qualify. And first, here he is. This isn't talking about being vice president. This is talking about how Hillary Clinton is part of the establishment and kind of showing how he would attack Hillary Clinton and the establishment if he were the vice presidential candidate, because, of course, one of the traditional jobs of the vice presidential candidate is to be an attack dog going against the candidate from, the opposition candidate, who would be Hillary Clinton. So here's how, I guess, Newt Gingrich would do it, at least in small part, talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this morning here.
What you do see is absolute certainty that he will be dramatically more conservative than Hillary Clinton. You see absolute certainty that not just his judgeships, but his cabinet and his appointments will be dramatically more conservative. And there's a deeper issue. Why does he get more votes than any Republican in history in the primaries? Because the country is desperate to overturn the bureaucracy in the city. You just cited an example. We no longer need school boards because a bureaucrat somewhere in Washington can issue a letter and change policy with no public hearings, no elected officials, no local control. If you want to keep going down that road, Hillary Clinton's your answer. If you want to break up the left-wing monopoly of these bureaucracies, Trump is the only person you've got who can do it.
Let me break in here, Congressman Hughes.
So that's the Newt Gingrich attempt to try to tie Hillary Clinton to the establishment and the insiders in Washington. Of course, Newt Gingrich is also one of the ultimate Washington insiders, even though he started off as a bomb thrower and an outsider taking over Congress. At least since the 1990s, when he was Speaker of the House, he has been a Washington insider, and even before that. But And of course, that thing about the transgender bathroom laws, saying it's federal Washington overreach. I covered this in the last 2 Sunday Clip Roundups, but basically it would also be saying that it's Washington overreach to say you can't have separate bathrooms for whites and blacks in the segregated South, that, you know, it's the same law. So it's the same Washington overreach, even if you may or may not agree with the interpretation, but it's the same federal power. So that's also kind of a bogus argument. And before I finish with the bogus Republicans, I want to move on to one final clip where Chris Wallace actually explicitly asked Newt Gingrich if he would consider serving as vice president, and he certainly did not say no, as I will discuss after you watch that last clip from the Republican side of the race before I get to the news about atheism and comedy as the last clip. But this is the penultimate clip tonight over here.
When you knew this was coming, there's been a lot of speculation, don't give me that luck, about you running.
I thought you were above this.
No, I'm not above it. This is what I do for a living. And I know you didn't think I was above it. There's a lot of speculation that he is going to ask you to be his running mate. Now, if he asks you, you're certainly going to say yes.
Well, if he asks me, I'm certainly going to say I want to sit down and talk about it. I don't think it's an automatic yes. I think you have to think through what does he think the job involves.
And if he indicates, as I'm sure he would, you're going to play a big role.
If he can convince Callista and me that it's doable and that it's serious and that we would in fact contribute, I think we'd be very hard-pressed not to say yes.
Would you like to do it?
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a great challenge, but as you know, I have a pretty interesting, exciting life. We're premiering a new movie on Washington and Mount Vernon Friday night. We have a new book coming out, Rediscovering God in America, this week. So we're pretty busy, but we could probably be lured into a new path.
I was going to say you could fit the vice presidency in, and the House isn't bad either. Mr. Speaker, always a pleasure to talk with you. Congressman Huelskamp, thank you.
So that was the Newt Gingrich answer on whether he wants to be vice president, and he didn't say no. Sounds like he would be easily convinced by Donald Trump if that's who Donald Trump wants to pick. One problem with that, one of the pundits on Fox News Sunday, I can't remember who, pointed out that if you're going to attack Hillary Clinton on being, you know, outmoded and from the 90s, you don't want Newt Gingrich making that argument because he's also from the same era. Although, on the other hand, no, I think I heard a pundit say that Newt Gingrich could take away some of Hillary Clinton's claims of the success of the Clinton administration by saying, you know, no, I was there, I was Speaker of the House, I was the one who pushed him into welfare reform and a balanced budget, and so Newt Gingrich could be good for that reason. So you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I've been reading the live comments along the way that have been scrolling by the screen, and I appreciate the 150 or so of you who've showed up as live viewers, and also I will read all the comments to the people who watch the recorded show later, of course. But before I finish the program, as I promised, there's one final clip. So I don't often cover the subject of atheism, but I really enjoyed Bill Maher's movie Religulous that Michael Moore talked about in his interview with Bill Maher. This is the 4th clip, I think, from that interview. So, like I said, I really enjoyed that interview, and I'm a fan of Michael Moore, like, even though I don't always agree with him. But I thought what the news he made here, he talked about a secret project he and Bill Maher had been discussing, and he asked the public at large to try to support it by, I don't know, tweeting, or I don't know how you would support this, but trying to get the other comedians involved to do this Kings of Atheism movie. And I want to show you that clip and the details about the project, and after you see Michael Moore and Bill Maher discuss it, I will give you a little bit more of my opinion on it, and then end the program for tonight after you watch that clip here.
Your one film is still one of the top 15 largest grossing documentaries of all time.
Because but I always said I said before it, I said after it, I don't want to be Michael Moore. Only he can do what he does. This is the one topic that I wanted to tackle. Religion is stupid, and there is no God.
Right.
You weren't going to do that one.
Right. Well, you did a great job with
Yeah.
it, but
No, you and I want to do a religion movie together.
we shouldn't. Yes. Are we still live on the internet right now?
We're still live. I mean, it doesn't matter because we can't get this thing going.
Well, but the truth is,
Yes.
folks, Bill and I do have a secret plan.
Yeah, we do.
And we've not discussed it publicly, and we're not going to release our 28 pages to you, sir.
Because we want to do a movie called The Kings of Atheism. I thought,
Okay, there it's out. Right?
There it's out.
It's out.
Well, what's the worst that could happen? That we get it made? As opposed to now when we're not?
No, but you've just told the Almighty that we're going to do this, and now
We're not going to do
you
it.
and I have to survive the next 6 months.
No, I want to. Remember the Kings of Comedy? They did the Kings of Comedy. There was like four
Then the Queens of Comedy.
African American.
Correct.
And then they did the Latino Kings.
Yes.
For the Kings of Atheism.
Kings of Atheism.
And we can't get anybody we want to sign up for
We are going to have 4 of America's top comedians. I'm going to film it, and we're going to travel through the Bible Belt, putting on these shows.
It's so awesome.
And we are going to live to the end of the production.
I mean, the first person I wanted to do it was my fellow atheist and boyfriend, Seth MacFarlane. I can't get him to commit. Maybe you people could.
He will do this.
Well, we can't get him to do it. Maybe they will. If we got Ricky Gervais, me, Sarah Silverman,
and others, I think,
Seth MacFarlane,
others
that would
will,
be an
and others will come out
Kings,
too.
Yes.
You listen, Bill. This is a movement that you actually are responsible for.
It would be such a great movie.
You're the most public person who, for the last decade or so, has been at the forefront of questioning this. And you did it when it was not popular, when somebody at HBO, this mainstream network we're on, must have said, Bill, that's...
Well, ABC before that.
ABC
was even
did,
matter.
right.
That was Disney.
But now people
But the great thing is that you directing it is that you're not an atheist.
Yes. Well, that's where the humor will come in.
The humor will come in a lot of places.
I will ride the bus with the comedians, you and your atheist friends, and you'll have 10 days.
Right.
You'll have 10 days to convert me to your debauchery, basically.
So all everybody has to do is contact Seth, Ricky, and Sarah and tell them to do our movie, and then we're done.
And Ari, get us the money to do it.
All right.
So that would be an awesome project. I would definitely go and watch that movie, and I would even, if they do like a tour around the country, and like the Kings of Comedy tour, I would go and see the show. That would be awesome. Sarah Silverman, Ricky Gervais, Seth MacFarlane, and Bill Maher, followed around by Michael Moore. That would be a great project. Although one of the weird things about that discussion, I thought, or something that was a little off to me, was when Michael Moore was saying that Bill Maher was like one of the early atheists that popularized this. And I mean, in a sense, that's true, but I guess that's more in pop culture. But I never heard Bill Maher referred to as one of the 4 horsemen of the atheist 4 horsemen. I can't even name them all, but it's Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and those other guys. They're supposed to be the big intellectual atheists, not Bill Maher. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting different way of looking at who popularized atheism from Michael Moore versus what I see argued online most of the time. And in a way, it makes me think that maybe this Kings of Atheism movie would be something that would move atheism to a different level than intellectuals like Richard Dawkins have been able to move it. I mean, it's gotten certainly a lot of publicity and airplay, but it might go to, comedy reaches a different level of people than books, like the God delusion and all that stuff. So it's an interesting idea, and I hope it didn't sound like Bill Maher was very confident the project would actually happen, but maybe you can tweet to Sarah Silverman and Seth MacFarlane and Ricky Gervais, and not that my addition to any sort of social media campaign is going to be that significant, but I thought I would play that clip, and that's the last clip I wanted to play for the broadcast. You can let me know what you think about the Kings of Atheism project, and whether comedians could popularize atheism in a different way than Richard Dawkins and the other horsemen of atheism have popularized it. But And you can let me know what you think about the 2016 presidential race and all those possible vice presidential candidates and all the other clips I showed. I hope you appreciate all the clips I picked out. If you want to help support me doing this program every Sunday and the other videos I make, which are sometimes popular and sometimes not so popular, you can support me on Patreon. As I said, I'm hoping to get myself up to minimum wage for the 10 or 12 hours I put into these broadcasts 4 times a month. So that would be $600 a month in patrons, and hopefully by June 1st I'll have a new plan for stickers to go out to people who pledge $5 or more. I'm hoping to get some $5 a month patrons added to get me up to that $600 a month goal I have. That's basically 50% more than people have pledged right now. And if you want to help me do that, there's a link down in the video description. Or if you want to give a one-time contribution and you live in one of the 4 special countries, you can do it by clicking on the little eye there. As I've said, I also appreciate all of you who give a thumbs up or post comments, live and recorded show comments, and share this around the internet, and whatever you do to support me continuing to bring you the corporate media view of what's going on in the world every week, and the other videos I seem to have time to put up every now and then. I appreciate your support. I appreciate getting your commentary and your opinions back, and until I have time to put up another video, maybe this Tuesday Megyn Kelly is doing this not Fox News, but Fox Broadcasting program, a primetime regular Fox network program interviewing, among other people, Donald Trump. I may try to do some sort of video about that. I'm not sure what other videos may be coming up this week. You never know what's going to happen, but until I have time to put up another video, or until I make another live clip roundup next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.